The last time I worked as an employee was back in 1998, when I was 19 years old. It was also the first time I would take the bus to get to work, have co-workers in an office, and most importantly, have bosses giving me a hard time for spending one extra minute in the bathroom. So today, I'm going to talk about the stories from my first and last job as an employee at the Telephone Directory Assistance Center. But mostly, I'll talk about the lessons I learned during the 3 months I worked as a phone operator and how those lessons made me see life differently, leading me to take a few more risks and do my own thing. Because I don't think I'd be where I am today if I had stayed an employee my whole life. My dream life at 19. The period before I started the job at the call center was one of the best in my life. At 19, I had already taken the university entrance exams once, gotten into the Technological Institute in Kavala, Greece, and was planning to take the exams again to get into the Faculty of Engineering in Thessaloniki, which had been my goal from the start. Having decided to retake just 2 out of the 4 subjects back then, my only real job for that year was to focus on physics and chemistry. That meant about 4 to 5 hours a week in classes at a tutoring center and maybe another 2 to 3 hours for homework. After that, every other hour of the week was completely mine. So yeah, you can tell I had a ton of free time back then. My daily routine during that period consisted of going to the gym, playing video games, and hanging out with friends. I wasn't learning any other foreign language since I had already gotten my C2 proficiency certificate in English 4 years earlier. I wasn't studying any art, and I definitely wasn't working. Total slacker. I sometimes wondered if I was living in a dream. Why I suddenly decided to get a job. It must have been around Christmas when my dad told me there was an opening to hire people at the call center where he worked. "Are you interested?" he asked. Even today, I still don't know what made me say yes. It was probably because I truly felt I had way too much free time and wasn't contributing much to the family, so it seemed like a chance to make myself useful. And then I thought that, at the very least, I'd make my parents somewhat proud to have a son who was finally going to work for the first time in his life. It wasn't about money. I didn't need cash. My parents were providing everything for me. I didn't have any close friends working at the time that could have influenced me either. Maybe I also saw it as just an experience, since I knew the gig at that specific call center wouldn't last more than 3 months. So I told myself, go for it, and if you don't like it, you'll be out in 3 months anyway. That's pretty much how I started working for the first and, as it turned out, the last time as an employee, answering my very first call. The first 3 days at the call center were training days. Experienced operators, both men and women who had been working there for years, trained us on how to use the equipment, but most importantly, on how to handle customers over the phone. There wasn't any specific book we had to read or a strict protocol to follow, other than a few standard opening lines we'd use when answering a call. "Hello, Directory Assistance. This is seat 313. How may I help you?" Of course, all of that felt overwhelming to an introverted guy like me. Being surrounded by other people, such as co-workers, was completely new to me as someone who had been sat in at home playing video games. Also, having to talk on the phone with total strangers when I was even scared to pick up the phone at home. My anxiety hit red alert when the moment came to pick from the group who would take the very first live test call. And the lucky winner was none other than me. As if that wasn't enough, my first call was in English. Yes, really. The second I recited the introductory script to identify myself, the woman on the other end started speaking to me in English with a full-on British accent. "Yes, hello, can you help me find a number, please?" 27 years later, I still remember it. It was the first time my English actually came in handy, beyond chatting with Swedish girls on the beaches of Halkidiki. If you know, you know. After the shock of that first workday, the rest of the first week went by as a kind of scouting period. Still, I don't remember struggling to adjust to the new environment, especially since I had already handled the toughest possible call first. I was a little risk-taking rebel, not an employee. The 3-hour shifts at the call center weren't always the same. Sometimes I would go from 9:30 to 1, other times from 4:30 to 8, and other times from 8:30 to midnight. You might have noticed that when we say 3-hour shift, we actually mean a shift that lasted 3.5 hours. To be precise, the shift lasted 3 hours and 36 minutes. I remember it because the center supervisor was so strict that if you were 1 or 2 minutes late, you'd have to work those extra minutes at the end of the shift. And if you tried to leave after 3.5 hours, he would point out that you still had 6 minutes left. I figure the young age of most of us who were hired for the 3-month stint played a role in that behavior. I never heard him speak in that harsh tone to the older permanent colleagues. I also remember one of those permanent colleagues, a real stunner, about my height and very striking. From her, I heard the word Malaganas for the first time. Back then, we didn't have Google to look up why she called me that. "You are a real Malaganas," she told me meaningfully one late afternoon while we were sitting at neighboring desks. It took me a few years to find out what Malaganas, or smooth talker, means. Meanwhile, from early on, I was trying to go against the system in every way possible. One of the unbreakable rules at the call center was that we weren't supposed to give out the number connected to a phone number. We were only allowed to provide numbers based on the names people asked for. "Yes, hello, I want the phone number for Jim Makos," would be a typical request. "Well, yes, there are many people with that name in Greece. Which city are you interested in?" I'd reply. "The one I want lives in Thessaloniki." And then, after a few seconds of searching on the computer, I'd give the number. But if someone asked, "I have this number, tell me who it belongs to," we weren't supposed to provide that information. By today's standards, that would be against GDPR. Yet sometimes, some of the callers genuinely sounded like sweet, kind souls. And I really wanted to help. So, risking the supervisor overhearing me, I would occasionally give out the information anyway. I did it when it was an elderly one who truly seemed to be searching out of real care and not some shady or sneaky reason, or someone who sounded like they just needed to get their job done, and with the answer right in front of me, I could save them a ton of time. Why not do it? I thought. And after all, I was taking a risk, and I was already getting pretty good at taking risks. Learning people one call at a time. This new contact with people taught me a lot when I found myself working at the call center at 19. Both the people around me at work and the ones on the other end of the line. I never took that headset off for the full 3.5 hours because I didn't want to take a break, even though I think I was entitled to one. I just don't like interrupting any job I'm doing. I learned to tell from someone's tone of voice and their first few words whether I would easily get along with the person on the other end. I learned how to assess quickly what the other person really needed. And I learned how the quality of calls changed depending on the time of day. For example, I remember that when my shift was in the morning, the callers were usually professionals, serious people who wanted the most useful answer right away. So I knew that morning shifts meant most calls would be purely business and wouldn't last more than a minute. The later into the evening my shift was, the more relaxed the conversations became. In fact, some nights I would end up talking for several minutes with complete strangers, men and women alike. Sometimes it wasn't even about directory information. Some people called just to talk to another human being. Instead of information, they were looking for company. In the end, I'd have to convince them to hang up because the supervisors would notice if I had an open line for 10 minutes and give me a warning. Those callers never failed to thank me for the time I had given them. Looking back, that might have been my first real encounter with loneliness. On the flip side, one of those calls actually led to me dating a girl. Yes, through the phone, we ended up meeting in person and being together for about 2 months. Kind of like a blind date. Something similar almost happened with a coworker of mine, a law student a little older than me. What stuck with me from her though was the visit to her place. For the first time in my life, I thought to bring sweets on my own when she invited me over one evening. Not knowing anything about portions, I ended up buying a huge pile of chocolate truffles from the pastry shop because instead of asking for a number, I asked for a whole kilo. She definitely had truffles to eat for a week after I left. From that night, what I remember most is how upset I was that I had left all those truffles at her place and had kept a few for myself. Finally, I'll never forget the time I answered a call from one of my friends who had dialed at least 50 times just to reach me. And back then, every call cost money. Well, you can't imagine how happy my friend was when he heard my voice on the line. Learning the value of money. Not everything was perfect in my first job as an employee at the call center. One definite downside was the strict and sometimes unfair treatment the supervisors gave to us younger colleagues. I vividly remember when a female coworker asked to go to the bathroom, and when she came back, they scolded her for taking too long. The supervisor made a whole scene on the entire floor, making her feel awful as if the end of the world had come. I got so angry at the supervisor that I almost stood up from my desk to defend her. My blood was boiling, not without reason at 19 years old. At the same time, though, I didn't want to create any more tension in the office. Another negative was that the office was downtown. I had to waste about 40 to 50 minutes every day getting there, and the same coming back home. That's why I combined it with other activities, like signing up for a swimming pool nearby, so I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. If I had the same job today, I definitely wouldn't let the bus time go to waste. Back then, though, we didn't just lack internet on cell phones, we didn't even have cell phones. Some days my shift was around midday, and I would end up grabbing something quick to eat near the call center. That's when, for the first time, I started comparing my wages to what I could actually buy. I mostly calculated how many hours of work a takeout meal cost me. There were plenty of times I skipped eating because I think, no, that sandwich isn't worth 1 hour of my work. Life is the greatest school. Overall, after a certain point, things settled into a routine at the office. I had entered the rat race, as they say. I was on autopilot. Especially the last month, it flew by without me even noticing, from what I can remember. My dad had announced he'd buy me a car, and I couldn't wait to be done with the call center and get back to the relaxed life of a high school graduate. There was no way I was renewing my contract for another 3 months. Well, anyway, exam season was supposedly approaching, and I needed to focus on the 2 subjects I was retaking. Meanwhile, my piggy bank had filled up with 240,000 drachmas back then, about $800 after 3 months working as an operator. At 19, with a brand new car, what could be more logical than blowing all that money on rimset tires? So yeah, I definitely didn't make any real money, or at least none of it stayed with me from that job. What stayed were some experiences and memories that I still carry with me today at 46. And I have no doubt that this experience shaped the path I took later in life. Fortunately, I worked as an employee once in my life. About 5 or 6 years after my first employee job at the directory assistance call center, I got the chance to land a proper job at the same organization. Not as an operator this time, but in a different position, especially since I was about to get my chemical engineering degree. But my experience as an operator had already taught me that I'd never again like being an employee. For starters, I had found other ways to make money, on my own, without anyone telling me what to do. On top of that, the memories of those supervisors at the call center pushed me even harder to follow the path of entrepreneurship and take risks in life, whatever dangers that brings. At least I wouldn't have a boss over my head again, counting my hours, scolding me for how long I talked to a lonely but polite caller, or how many minutes I spent in the bathroom. Still, I would want my daughter to go through that stage too. Maybe she'll come to appreciate the same things I appreciate now, things I wouldn't value if I hadn't had the first employee job experience. Plus, she'll learn the value of saving when she blows her whole paycheck on clothes, just like I did on my car.